I'm begging your pardon, good friends. I don't mean to distract you from the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan, the crisis with the labor shortage, the crisis with inflation, the crisis with vaccine mandates, the crisis with our southern border. I don't mean to distract you from all of those things. But we do have big news that we do need to talk about. Outside of all of those crises, we have another one. Eviction moratorium and the looming mass eviction of millions of people. The rock and a hard place we find ourselves in as Americans, and it is the fault of everyone in government, basically. And hey, let's be real. Donald Trump's 15 days to slow the spread, the shutting down of the economy, has probably destroyed it. But Joe Biden tried to stop the evictions with an eviction moratorium. Now, at first, there was an eviction moratorium in place for some time. Well, when Joe Biden went to the Supreme Court to try and extend it, they said, no, it must be done through an act of Congress. Otherwise, illegal. Okay. So Congress picks it up and says, we can't come to an agreement on this. So no, we're not going to do it. So Joe Biden says, okay, well, the Supreme Court told me it's illegal. Guess I'll do it anyway. And tried to extend the moratorium by basically creating a new moratorium that was slightly different, trying to claim some, specious or dubious claim about, well, these are highly infected areas, so we're allowed to seize private property from people. In a shocking turn that everyone saw coming, Supreme Court has said, hey, we already told you this was illegal. Now, I'll tell you what I'm really impressed by. So they're shutting down Biden's eviction moratorium again. We are looking at an escalation of the labor shortage. It is going to get bad. I tell you this. Whose fault is it? Who cares? It's going to happen. At this point, the political bickering is wasting everyone's time when you should be preparing for what this means. There's a lot of things that it means. When you get what is going to be like 10 million people homeless, you better be ready for that mass economic crash. I mean, it's going to be a Great Depression, I'll tell you that. So think about what you can do right now to protect yourself. Learn what you can. Get out of cities. Maybe buy some emergency supplies. I'm not saying prep for the apocalypse, but man, I tell you, I think we're in for a rude awakening. We got another story. The Great Resignation is still happening, and it's expected to get worse. 55% of Americans anticipate looking for a new job. Now, that's just looking for a new job. Since April, I think in April, there was like 4 million resignations. So the labor shortage? Oh, yeah. Have you gone to the store lately? Have you noticed there's a lot of things you can't buy? Well, thanks, Biden. I'm not blaming Trump for it. The first 3 years of Trump, man, the economy was amazing. But let's read about the eviction moratorium and talk about private property rights and what is more important than your communist utopia. These people may be thinking, well, we can't allow the U.S. to collapse, so let's strip people of their rights to own private property for the sake of helping the people who might become homeless. And I'm like, nah, rights come first. If the United States finds itself flying off a cliff or crashing into a brick wall, I think we have to stick to rights first, because we'll make it, but we won't make it if we strip people of their rights. The ends do not justify the means. We got the story from the New York Times. Supreme Court ends Biden's eviction moratorium. The ruling followed political and legal maneuvering by the administration to retain protections for tenants. It puts hundreds of thousands at risk of being put out of their homes. Bill de Blasio came out and called the Supreme Court far right. Yeah, Bill de Blasio is a Nazi. The New York Times says the Supreme Court on Thursday rejected the Biden administration's latest moratorium on evictions, ending a political and legal dispute during a public health crisis in which the administration's shifting positions had subjected it to criticism from adversaries and allies alike. The court issued an 8-page majority opinion, an unusual move in a ruling on an application for emergency relief, where terse orders are more common. The court's 3 liberal justices dissented. The decision puts hundreds of thousands of tenants at risk of losing shelter. It's actually in the millions, to be correct. While the administration struggles to speed the flow of billions of dollars in federal funding to people who are behind in rent because of the COVID pandemic and its associated economic hardship, only about $5.1 billion of the $46.5 billion in aid has been dispersed by the end of July, according to figures released on Wednesday, as bureaucratic delays at the state and local levels snarled payouts. The majority opinion, which was unsigned, said the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had exceeded its authority. Here's the amazing thing. They already ruled that And the Supreme Court has no mechanism by which to enforce any of this stuff. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen. Joe Biden will just come out, slightly alter the previous mandate, and say this is a new mandate because the Supreme Court can't do anything about it. But I'll tell you what you can do. This means Biden, his order is not a legitimate order because the Supreme Court has ruled it unconstitutional, illegal. They've exceeded their authority. That means if you are to evict someone and they try to sue you, you'll win. You will ultimately win in court. Now, here's the big problem. Perhaps we are now learning that not only does the presidential administration, the president, have no clothes, the Supreme Court doesn't either. You know, what happens if you evict someone and they sue you? And then they say you violated the eviction moratorium. So you take them to court, or you get pulled into court. And the lower court says, you know, we agree, you're allowed to evict. So they appeal. It makes its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says the eviction stands. And then the person says, well, I'm not going to leave anyway. What are you going to do about it? What happens when the cop comes in and says, listen, I work for the city of New York, right? I'm a bootlicker for de Blasio, and I don't care what the Supreme Court says because my boss said do it anyway. And then stops you from evicting someone. It'll happen. I mean, here, let me clarify. In the circumstances that I laid out, if those things are to occur and that, you know, people get sued and they challenge this, what I mean to say is, if it comes down to the mayor of New York and the Supreme Court, the police officer will very likely side with the mayor. That's what we've seen so far. Now, to be fair, in New York specifically, many of the NYPD have refused to enforce the COVID restrictions. But you'll get state troopers. You know, they'll lick the feet of Hochul or whatever, who's ever in office. And they'll say, look, we don't care what the Supreme Court says. We're New York. And therein lies the continual collapse of the United States. When the president can stick his middle finger up to the Supreme Court and they do nothing about it. Losers. I got to tell you, man, the Supreme Court is a bunch of losers. Losers. You know why? Because they don't do anything. They're so scared that people will realize they can't enforce anything, that they barely actually try to rule on things. We had a whole bunch of cases they could have ruled on in the past couple of years that would have been significant, but they're like, but if we do that and then they defy us, people will realize we can't actually do anything. What a waste of time. Here we are. Biden just gave a big middle finger to the Supreme Court, and what did they do? Calmly just said the exact same things they already said. Where's the derision, the ire, and the outrage? Where's the penalty for violating the Supreme Court's order saying any eviction moratorium must go through Congress? The CDC has no right to do this. And Biden said, I'll do it again. So what's to stop him from doing it again? And then people will wake up to the fact that there is no Supreme Court. They are powerless. Because so long as the police are willing to enforce whatever it is they're told to do, who cares? I mean, let's be real. The Constitution says you can't do certain things, and the cops do it anyway. I tell you the story about that woman who accidentally drove into New Jersey with a gun. In Pennsylvania, you're allowed to have a gun. In New Jersey, you're not. She didn't realize. She gets pulled over, and with a smile on his face, that cop arrested her on felony charges of illegal possession of a weapon. I thought the Constitution says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And even if that cop thought it was wrong for her to cross that bridge, could he not have just said, ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around. I'm going to escort you back to the bridge. You cannot bring this weapon in New Jersey. Luckily, I stopped you before you commit, No, they don't care. He was like, ooh, hot dog. I got his middle-aged woman. She's going to go to prison for 10 years. Fortunately, the NRA stepped in. There's a story I was told at a gun shop. And maybe there's more nuance to this. But I've seen it over and over and over again. The Supreme Court has been exposed. What are they going to do about it? What are they doing? They got nothing. Nothing. Here's what they say. The CDC has imposed a nationwide moratorium on evictions in reliance on a decades-old statute that authorizes it to implement measures like fumigation and pest extermination. It strains credulity to believe that this statute grants the CDC the sweeping authority that it asserts. Didn't you say that last time? And Biden just went, I'll do it again. You're doing nothing. No, the system is collapsing, my friends. Justice Stephen G. Breyer, writing for 3 dissenting justices, faulted the court for its haste during a public health crisis. These questions call for considered decision-making, informed by full briefing and argument. Their answers impact the health of millions. We should not set aside the CDC's eviction moratorium in this summary proceeding. Pathetic. The majority said the issues were fully considered and straightforward. It is indisputable that the public has a strong interest in combating the spread of COVID-19 Delta variant. But our system does not permit agencies to act unlawfully, even in pursuit of desirable ends. If a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must specifically authorize it. In dissent, Justice Breyer wrote, "The public interest is not favored by the spread of disease or a court's second guessing of the CDC's judgment." Justice Breyer, you're a Nazi, okay? You are a mother Nazi. Let's just be real about this. You do not have the right to seize someone's private property just because of a pandemic. Sorry. Yeah, you just can't do it. Now, there's a lot of things we can do in a health emergency, and there's a lot of questions that must be raised and a lot of laws that must be challenged because simply declaring an emergency does not grant you the right to supersede someone's rights. Within certain circumstances, we have tolerated the suspension of rights, or I should say the government infringement upon rights because of dire measures. Someone said this, I can't remember who. If you allow a government to enact a decree because of an emergency, what's to stop them to creating an emergency to enact a decree? If they have that power to just declare an emergency and they can do whatever they want, what's going to stop them? That's why we can say things like, we understand Abraham Lincoln crossed the line in a lot of ways. We also understand it was an existential crisis and one of the bloodiest wars ever fought. In this pandemic, yes, we have a large loss of life, but we don't even know if we're doing the right thing as a society as to how to deal with this properly. You got a lot of people who are in debate over the proper protocols for this. So does that give the CDC the right to seize private property? That's a far. I'd say no. I'd say no. Not without compensation, at least. The Biden administration and other moratorium proponents predicted that the decision would set off a wave of dire consequences. As a result of this ruling, families will face the painful impact of evictions and communities across the country will face greater risk of exposure to COVID-19. Jen Psaki said. The ruling also renewed pressure on congressional Democrats to try to extend the freeze over the opposition of Republicans. Tonight, the Supreme Court failed to protect the 11 million households across the country from violent eviction in the middle of a deadly global pandemic, says Cori Bush. We already know who is going to bear the brunt of this disastrous decision. Black and brown communities, and especially black women. Let me show you something. Here's what she said. Cori Bush tweeted, "We were outside the Capitol for 5 days, rain, heat, cold. If they think this partisan ruling is going to stop us from fighting to keep people housed, they're wrong. Congress needs to act immediately for every unhoused or soon to be unhoused person in our districts." That's literally what the Supreme Court said to do. The Supreme Court said, if a federally imposed eviction moratorium is to continue, Congress must specifically authorize it. The application to vacate stay presented to the Chief Justice and by him referred to the court is granted. Okay. So, Corey, you're in Congress. Deal with it. You couldn't do it last time. If you can't do it now, you don't get to rule by decree. Landlords who have said the moratorium settled them with billions of dollars in debt hailed the move. The government must move past failed policies and begin to seriously address the nation's debt tsunami, which is crippling both renters and housing providers alike, said Bob Pinnegar, the president of the National Apartment Association. It will most likely take a while for the backlog of eviction cases in many states to result in the displacement of renters. But tenant groups in the South, where fast-track evictions are common, are bracing for the worst. Oh, my friends, it's more than that. It's more than that. We also have the end of the free money handouts, those bonus booster payments, the stimulus checks. Yeah, that's set to end, what is it, like September 4th or something like that? People are going to stop getting money, and they're not going to have houses. Now, evictions take 30 days. So assuming this lands and there's no more, illegal activity from the likes of Biden, people will start getting pushed out within 30 days. I don't want people to be homeless. I don't want vets to be homeless. I don't want people to lose their private property. I don't want people to be left hungry in the streets. But I also don't think it makes sense when you read a lot of these stories. Not every single one, but enough of them. Where people say, like, I quit my job at Walmart because I didn't like it and I've been getting unemployment and I haven't been paying rent because, it's just too hard. That happened. People stopped paying rent because they didn't have to. Landlords, many of them are mom and pop landlords with like a single property. The world is not made up of massive billionaires everywhere. The left doesn't get this. I was talking to, let's take a look at this. Talking with Ian on the Tim Castaro podcast about piracy. And he said, like, piracy, Ian's argument was piracy was good because it gives you exposure. And that shows you the myopic vision many people have. Not everybody who produces art is famous. Not everybody who produces art puts their face on it. Not everybody who makes a movie is a big Hollywood celebrity. Not every actor is a celebrity. In fact, it is the extreme minority. The extreme minority of movies are blockbusters. The extreme minority of art pirated comes from wealthy individuals with their faces on them. The majority of landlords are not massive multinational corporations. They're mom and pop shops. People don't get this. They think Amazon runs the world. Amazon's got power. Google's got power. But you know what the engine of New York City is? Small businesses, bodegas. When you want to buy groceries in New York City, sure, there's big supermarkets. Of course there are. But people just often will go to the bodega for the things they need. The milk, the soda, the water, the chips, the beans, whatever. They got deli meats at bodegas. These are small shops. Now, many of these bodegas are actually part of chains. Someone will own like 50 bodegas. One company will. And they operate all these little corner stores. So I'm not trying to imply that they're a small business. They're probably a medium-sized to a large-sized business. But it's not like, these people think landlords are all evil, ultra-wealthy millionaires going, yeah, we'll extract the wealth from the proletariat. No, it's probably a retiree being like, I've invested all of my life savings into this building so that I can rent out the basement and live on a budget for the last 15 years of my life. And that's who's being ripped off with this eviction moratorium. In recent days, Mr. Biden's team has been mapping out strategies to deal with the likely loss of the moratorium, with a plan to focus its efforts on a handful of states, including South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Ohio, that have large backlogs of unpaid rent and few statewide protections for tenants. The administration had at first concluded the Supreme Court ruling in June had effectively forbidden it from imposing a new moratorium after an early one expired. Well, the administration had prevailed in that ruling by a 5-4 vote. One member of the majority, Kavanaugh, wrote that he believed the moratorium to be unlawful and that he had cast his vote to temporarily sustain it, only to allow an orderly transition. He would not support a further extension without clear and specific congressional authorization. So the first challenge, they were like, okay, we're going to let you keep going. See if Congress can fix this. They didn't. Then they went to the Supreme Court again, and they said, no, we're not playing this game anymore. Now, Biden just goes and does it. Congress didn't act. But after political pressure from Democrats, a surge in the pandemic, and new considerations of legal issues, Biden admin on August 3rd issued the moratorium that was subject to the new ruling. The administration's legal maneuvering might have failed, but it bought some time for tenants threatened with eviction. In unusually candid remarks this month, Biden said that this was part of his calculus in deciding to proceed with the new moratorium, which was set to expire on October 3rd. Congress declared a moratorium on evictions in the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. This we understand, blah, blah, blah. Think about this. Biden said he knew this was illegal. So let me tell you something. If you have someone that you need to evict, you should have already been moving forward as if this moratorium didn't exist. The Supreme Court already said it was illegal. It doesn't matter if Biden comes out and says, well, this one's slightly different. It doesn't matter. The CDC has no authority to issue any of these orders for any reason. Congress can, but they didn't. So if you are a mom and pop shop landlord, by all means, start the proceedings. It takes 30 days. An eviction is a lawsuit against your tenant. And then, what some people have said is what's going to happen? What do you do? We were talking about this the other day. What do? You call the cops. And then what if the cops don't do it? And therein lies the big problem. I'm willing to bet that the police will drop to their knees and satisfy Bill de Blasio, licking his feet, of course, licking his feet when he says, I refuse to allow you to evict people. The property of these mom and pop landlords and retirees belongs to us now. And the cops are going to be like, yes, my liege. And the Supreme Court will be like, guys, stop. You're violating the Supreme Court. And they're going to be like, what are you going to do about it? I don't see any Supreme Court cops coming around. Do you? That's what I think. I'll tell you this. There are a lot of good cops who will quit. I often say this. I don't blame the individual officers for the actions of the larger group to an extent. But I do blame the officers who are willing to uphold the illegal actions for creating the situation. So let me put it this way. An individual officer has a choice. When he says no, I don't blame him. I say, you are a good man. You're a good person. You're a good person, man or woman. When they say, you know what, I just got to do what I'm told, de Blasio said so, it is your fault, officer. It is your fault. You have a choice. You could simply say, yo, the Supreme Court said no. I don't care what you say. And you know what? Maybe if you stand up for yourself, these things wouldn't happen. Because like, oh no, but what if you get fired? Well, you got the Supreme Court on your side, right? Or are you more scared of de Blasio than you are of the Supreme Court? Maybe if they try and fire you for instructing you to defy the Supreme Court, you could sue for damages and maybe win a substantial settlement. Nobody really wants to go through these fights. They want the path of least resistance. That's why I say ultimately, those who are willing to say, I'm just following orders, are the true villains of the story. Because if some guy showed up to my house and told me to do something, I'd be like, no. Well, I want you to go do this. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. You better do it or else. Okay, what's the else? You're not going to force me to do something. I'm not playing that game. There was a story. You may have seen it about a guy. He's a pizza delivery guy. And apparently he tried robbing a bank and he had something strapped to his neck. The original story, or I should say, is that it was a hoax that apparently people strapped a bomb to this guy's neck and then ordered him to rob a bank. And the bomb, would go off if he didn't. I think what happened was the police concluded he was in on it and it was a hoax or something. I'm not sure I believe it. But I'll tell you this. If I was a pizza guy, and apparently the story was that he went to deliver a pizza. They kidnapped him, strapped the bomb to his neck and said, rob a bank or else. And then as he was sitting there begging for help, the bomb goes off and blows a hole in his chest. If it were me and I went to deliver a pizza and some guy strapped a bomb to my neck and said, rob the bank or else, you know what I'd say? No. I'd be like, dude, I'm not doing it. Sorry. I'm not doing it. I'd be like, you can either take this thing off me right now or detonate it. Because I don't play that game. I've been through hostile environment training. And I was the troublemaker. Always screwing with the system. And they couldn't plan for the things that I would do. I'm not saying I'm better or special. I'm saying I'm obstinate. I'm stubborn. I'm arrogant and egotistical and all of those awful things. And so if someone comes to me and tells me to do it, I say no. And I'm sure most of you actually feel similarly, to be honest. Because, I see what people are saying. We've had people on the show who are like, the more the Democrats say you must do it, the more I say, F you, I'm not going to do it now. And there it is. Like those union guys in New York. You see that coverage we got at timcast.com? He's like, they want to make me do it? Nah, I'm not going to do it. I love it. Don't you try and force anything on me because I will just say no. You get more flies with honey, huh? I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.